Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we are going to discuss globalization and radio. This lecture is a part of your paper Media and Globalization. In this lecture, we will learn the origin and growth of radio broadcast with a special focus on international broadcast. Radio is the most widespread media across the globe. It is a personal medium that is easy to comprehend even for those who don't have formal education. If we look at the history of radio, its powers have been used in the spheres of politics, propaganda, and development purposes. Whenever radio has been used for propaganda, it has come out as a very powerful media. Examples from the Second World War and more recently from Rwanda underline the huge impact of radio in propagating hatred and even violence. Radio has also been put to political use, with the national governments using it as a tool for authority. Radio has been employed as an important instrument in the process of development as well. Public service broadcast as well as community radio have been used to a good effect in propagating messages on health, education, gender equality, etc. Radio also is looked upon as window to the outside world, UNESCO report. Besides, commercial radio too has seen great success and is one of the preferred modes of entertainment and news across the globe. We will learn about the origin of radio broadcast and study its growth and evolution in the international scenario. We will learn about the major players in the international broadcast and will also be apprised about the content leanings. We will examine the technological changes in the field of audio broadcast and analyze its implications in the field of radio broadcast. Let us briefly look at the history of radio broadcasting. Radio broadcasting traces its origin in the evolution of theories and inventions in the field of electromagnetism and telegraph. In the year 1864, James Maxwell gave the theory that electromagnetic waves could travel through free space. Working on electromagnetism theory of Maxwell, Hertz proved in 1888 transmission of airborne electromagnetic waves. Some 2 decades later, working on the principle of Hertz waves, scientists in the US and Europe explored the possibilities of wireless telegraphy. Rapid strides were made in communication technology to facilitate ship-to-port communication and vice versa. Taking Hertz's contribution forward, G. Marconi was able to build commercially successful wireless telegraphy in the year 1894. The first radio broadcast is attributed to Reinhold Fessenden, who in the year 1906 played violin in Massachusetts that was heard on ships at sea. In the next few years, consolidating this AM broadcasting techniques led to radio broadcasting getting more commercial footprints. One of the earliest news programs to be broadcast on radio happened in the year 1920 by a station called 8MK in Detroit, Michigan. Radio broadcasts were mostly done by stations set up in universities in Chicago, Pittsburgh, New York, etc. This was soon followed by commercial broadcasts in music and sport. By the mid-1920s, there were almost 450 radio stations in the United States which were run by amateurs. It is important to note here that in the early years of radio broadcasting, advertisement wasn't a source of revenue. Radio companies were manufacturing radios and selling them, just as newspaper companies were selling newspapers. These companies were offering programs to sell more radio sets. It was only after a few years that these broadcasters realized that they can make more money by sponsoring programs than by just selling radio sets. Another important development during this period was the evolution of FM broadcasting and shortwaves in radio. The refinement in radio broadcast technology and corresponding maturity of radio broadcast resulted in two phenomena of commercial radio in the US and establishment of government radio in Europe. In Europe, public service broadcasting emerged dominant and radio was not allowed to be under the dominance of private companies for whom profit making was the sole aim. So instead of advertising as main revenue source, these public service broadcasting depended on license fees and taxes for financial support. Evolution of history and of radio broadcast in India. Now, let us look at the evolution and history of radio broadcast in India. Radio broadcasting came to India riding the shoulders of private radio clubs. Scholars like Das write that radio broadcasting in India began with three identities competing with each other: private entrepreneurs, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and the colonial state. Lionel Fielden, who was India's first controller of broadcasting, argued that Indian entrepreneurs were motivated by the success of commercial radio in the US and Europe and wanted to begin their own private broadcasting. Indian Radio Telegraph Company was floated by R.M. Chinoy and Sultan Chinoy in 1923, and it became the first radio station to begin broadcasting. Soon enough, radio clubs were established in Calcutta, Madras, and Lahore. In 1927, Indian Broadcasting Company was formed with the two private radio clubs of Bombay and Calcutta under its fold. This private company was not able to sustain it financially and went into liquidation in 1930. India was still under colonial rule then, and at this moment the government stepped in to launch its own Indian state broadcasting services and took over radio broadcasting. At the same time, while the private clubs were in their nascent stage in India, the BBC wanted to employ its model in India and asked for centralized broadcast. But the British government in India was not interested in providing broadcasting rights to autonomous public trust. The overall survival in this threefold competition was the colonial state with a fledgling ISBS that was renamed as All India Radio in 1936. During the time of the Second World War, one of the prime aims of All India Radio was to encounter the German propaganda in Afghanistan and border areas. Thus, AIR started its Pashto language service in 1939. During these years, more than 20 bulletins were broadcast some days. In 1946, AIR was put under the Information and Broadcasting Department. In 1997, AIR came under the autonomous body Prasar Bharati. All India Radio runs various broadcast services. Some of the important ones are National Service that mostly run news-based programs, newsreel, spotlight, current affairs, etc. from Delhi. The Regional Service that is broadcast from every state and UT in the local language and caters to programs of music, culture, women-based, agriculture, etc. The Local Service catering to district level issues. The Vivid Bharati service that caters to light entertainment programs, and the External Service that broadcasts programs in foreign countries. Internalization of radio. Some leading examples. Ever since the propaganda war on radio during the Second World War, radio and other broadcasts have become a part of international diplomacy. This has led to various national or public service broadcasters beaming service across borders. After the end of Cold War, international broadcasting has become less antagonistic and more international cooperation is seen among international broadcasters. International broadcast is an important piece now in international flow of communication, as is seen as a tool of free flow of information. UNESCO report. The UNESCO also takes a stand on international broadcasting and says that its main purposes are to present news objectively, put forward best culture of the broadcasting country, and to promote the broadcasting country's views on international world issues. Some of the leaders in international radio broadcast today include the British Broadcasting Corporation, Voice of America, Radio France Internationale, Deutsche Welle Radio, Radio Moscow, All India Radio External Service, etc. British Broadcasting Corporation. Let's start with BBC first. The BBC was established by the Royal Charter and is the public service broadcaster. The BBC is funded by annual TV license fee that it receives from British households and companies that holds the radio sets. In UK, the first broadcast took place in Chelmsford, sponsored by the Daily Mail in 1920. This live radio broadcast was a success, and many applications were received in the coming years from private entities to broadcast radio content. The General Post Office was the licensing authority, and it recommended that all private parties from a consortium and a single license will then be issued. This led to the formation of British Broadcasting Company Limited, a private broadcasting company. However, radio was deemed too important to be left at the hands of private commercial entities, and the BBC was established as a public service broadcaster. Unlike their private entrepreneur counterparts, the BBC didn't went for advertising as chief revenue generator, but successfully explored the route of license fees. The BBC went international in the year 1927 and the world service of the BBC started broadcasting on short waves in 1927. They saw unparalleled growth at the international horizon, and by the 90s, BBC was broadcasting in 38 languages with a listenership base of 130 million, and it is by UNESCO report. The BBC got into the world of digital in the year 1995 when it started digital audio broadcasting programs. They also started broadcasting on FM bands in foreign countries where they could get the required license to do so. The BBC also offers its radio programs on their website, Voice of America. Next is Voice of America. What is it? The Voice of America is the main broadcaster in North America that transmits international radio programs out of the United States. Voice of America has been established by the government of USA and it airs programs to various foreign countries. This radio is financed by the US government and its administration is under the United States Information Agency. As per a UNESCO report, by the 1990s, the Voice of America was broadcasting 1035 hours of content all over the world, and they were broadcasting in 44 different languages. Voice of America's role during the Cold War was focused on the communist countries, and the effort was to broadcast in the regional languages. However, since the end of the Cold War, the broadcast content has become less pronounced. RFI, DW, and list of some other broadcasters. Now let us look at some other prominent radio broadcasters. Radio Beijing from China is the international radio service which was started to cater to the Asian countries. But the radio has ever since evolved to broadcast on Africa, Australia, Europe, and the Americas. By 1995, it was broadcasting content in more than 47 languages and was on air for 2,340 airtime hours every week. In Africa, Radio Nigeria has a robust international service as it broadcasts in Hausa, English, French, Arabic, and Swahili to all countries of Africa. South African Broadcasting Corporation is another notable international broadcaster in Africa. Radio France Internationale began its service in 1975 and initially its international broadcast targeted French-speaking countries only. But by the 90s, Radio France Internationale had expanded its footprints to various other countries with their broadcast in English, Portuguese, Chinese, Vietnamese, etc. Owing to their broadcast in various languages, along with French, RFI was able to cross 30 million listeners by 1995. In Germany, Deutsche Welle Radio is the international broadcaster. Initially, DW produced content in German language and targeted mostly the Eastern European countries. But with reunification of Germany, Berlin International also merged with DW and added strength to its political, cultural, and musical programming. Today, DW has expanded its service to many other languages, including English and Hindi, and is expected to cater to a listenership of 100 million. Similarly, Radio Moscow was considered a giant in international broadcast, but after the breakup of the Soviet Union, the station closed down many of its international offices and programs. All India Radio External Service Division. Let us now look at the External Service Division of All India Radio. The All India Radio began their international broadcast with a program in Pashto language in 1939. The idea of this broadcast was to counter the Nazi propaganda in Afghanistan and neighboring countries. By the 90s, the External Service Division of the All India Radio aired programs in 155 countries in 17 Indian and 8 foreign languages. The aim of these broadcasts is to present the Indian point of view on major international and national issues. Through these programs, the All India Radio also aims to present Indian culture and latest national developments to its international listeners and Indian origin people who are settled abroad. However, the response to these broadcasts have not been very impactful. Technology and international radio. While various national and state service broadcasters have transcended international boundaries through their international content, various technological advancements have also made commercial radio to beam internationally. Some of the technology guided advancements in radio broadcasts that have left big impression on international radio broadcast are digital audio broadcasting, satellite radio and internet radio. We will now discuss them one by one. Digital audio broadcasting. Instead of transmitting sound as waves, digital audio broadcasting transmits sound as a computer code. It can also carry text, data, images, etc., thus giving the listeners a multimedia experience. This means that a listener on DAB can listen to the audio program and can also see on the computer screen the name of the artist and other information that is provided. With DAB, transmission noise is avoided and it also allows the broadcasters to send multiple programs simultaneously. It was first introduced by the BBC in 1995 and other international broadcasters including All India Radio soon adopted the technology for its clear quality of sound. However, digital audio broadcasting is a costly affair and is regarded as cost prohibitive in countries and regions where there are financial constraints. Satellite radio. The financial restrictions of DAB have been somewhat reduced by the use of satellite radio. Satellite radio uses satellites to broadcast radio programs digitally. Some of the big names in satellite radio that beam programs internationally are World Space Radio, Sirius and XM. World Space used a network of satellites to air radio programs digitally in Asia, Africa and Latin America. In India, World Space is the only foreign satellite radio station that is allowed to broadcast. However, the programs are limited to music-based content. In the international arena, satellite radio is also used to broadcast educational programs. Internet radio. Let us discuss what is Internet radio. The boom in Internet technology and digital media has enabled almost all the major radio broadcasters to maintain their Internet presence. The key players in international radio broadcast like the BBC, DW, VOA, AIR, etc. maintain robust website where their radio programs can be accessed by the listeners. Internet radio has allowed even the localized FM broadcasters to be heard across their borders on the websites. Other than commercial broadcasters, many individual and amateur broadcasters have also set up their radio station on the internet. Podcast is another important development in the field of radio broadcast. It also uses internet as the medium to transmit audio programs. However, the major difference is in podcast and internet radio is that podcast is on-demand radio, meaning that these programs don't run on fixed schedules like those of radio stations, but they can be downloaded or listened to at the chosen time of the audience. Once again, the big international broadcasters are catching on to podcast and claim it to be a major player in audio broadcast in the coming years. Conclusion. Let us now try and summarize what we discussed in the lecture. Radio is one of the most popular media globally and has evolved with time. Radio broadcast rode on the shoulders of wireless and telegraph technology, and even today it is continuously evolving with the changing technologies. International broadcast of the globalized radio began as tool for propaganda and counter-propaganda. Later international radio broadcast took a more subtle tone as they began to showcase world viewpoint from the host country's perspective and also became a window to their culture. Leaders in international broadcast include British Broadcasting Corporation, Voice of America, Beijing Radio, Deutsche Welle Radio, Radio Finance International, Radio Moscow, etc. In India, the All India Radio began their international broadcast in 1939, and ever since the external service is broadcast in more than 150 countries. International radio is used as a tool in international diplomacy. Changes in technology have allowed more players to come on air with the use of internet and digital technologies. Some of the notable technological advancement post the 1990s has been digital audio broadcast, satellite radio, internet radio, and podcast. The leading international broadcasters have kept abreast with the challenges and maintain a strong internet presence today, as the jostle to control the audio broadcast continues in this century too. Do attempt the questions in the self-evaluate quadrant. For further reading suggestions, please prefer to read the third quadrant. Thank you.